What is up, producers? Welcome to Low End Candy. My name is Behemoth. I am your host, and today we're going to talk about your first 10 minutes in Ableton and how to master arrangement mode. So if you're completely new to Ableton, you just open it up, you don't know what the heck you're looking at, this video is for you. Before I hop in, I wanted to mention that I'm currently doing one-on-one mentorship lessons. I have 3 degrees in music production. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been through formal education. I've done YouTube. I've done all that stuff. The quickest way that I've ever gotten better as a producer is working one-on-one with a mentor. I've had some insane mentors in the past. If that's something you're interested in, the link's in the description. I'm working with a very dope company called Ableton Live Teacher. They're brand new this year, so check them out. Let's get into the video. Up here we have our view. Note that this is arrangement view. So you have 2 different views. You have session and arrangement. Now, session view over here, we're not really going to get into because it's not so much commonly used unless you're doing like a live performance or maybe you're doing live instruments or looping or something like that. 99% of the producers I know use arrangement mode, so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. Arrangement mode is comparable to all the other DAWs, just basically like a timeline version of your track from A to Z. So when we open it up, yours will look a little different than mine because I have different sends down here and everything. So we're going to kind of go ahead and just talk about what we're looking at here and what you're seeing. So first we have our audio track. Now an audio track, you can only place audio clips on. We have audio and we have a MIDI track. So the MIDI track is for MIDI instruments, for plugins, for all that stuff. Anything where you're using like a MIDI keyboard or inserting or drawing in MIDI is going to be a MIDI clip. Next to those down here, we have our different sends. So what a send track is basically you send a certain amount of the signal from your tracks to it and it processes that amount. So say if we have a kick up here. If we want to drive the kick into the reverb send, we're going to crank up this one right here. These are in order, so we have 1, 2, and 3. Now, one thing that's important to remember about sends is it's not actually making the signal wet. It's making a completely another signal wet. So this right here without the send is still a dry signal. When we turn the send on, it has an additional signal that's wet. So that's a little bit more comprehensive, and that goes into parallel processing and everything, but just so you're aware. So we have our send tracks down here, we have our audio tracks, and we have our MIDI track. Our features over here, we have the yellow, the main button with the number on it, which turns the track on or off. S will solo the track, so it'll only play this track. And the quick key for solo is, of course, S. So as long as you're selected on a track, you can click S and it'll solo that track. The C is the panning section. That'll allow us to move the panning, the stereo image from one side to the other. So if we move it all the way over here, we're only going to get signal in our right speaker. If we move it all the way over here, our left speaker. One thing to note about this is if you right click it, you can enter select split stereo pan mode. What this is basically the easy way to explain this is when you're panning something, you're not actually moving the whole signal to the right or to the left. You're cutting half of the signal out. So we're only hearing the right side of the signal. With split stereo pan mode, what you're doing is you can actually move the left side of the signal to the right. And so you're actually playing both sides of the signal on one side. I know it's a little confusing. I'm actually going to do a video about this. I'm going to link in the description as far as how split stereo pan mode works. So we're going to go ahead and go back. Here we have your fader. So you'll notice if we move this down, over here on our faders, it's moved down. That's one thing I forgot to mention about this part is up here we have all the different clips to trigger. Down here, we actually do have our faders, so this is going to be something you're going to want to pay attention to. You can easily switch between these 2 screens with tab. And here we have your fader. This is going to be the last thing you're going to touch. You'll have your groups here, all that stuff. But all that information is available here. So we went over our sends, we went over our panning, our fader, and then over here we have the record button, which is going to be the arming button. So when you press this, it doesn't necessarily record right away. What it does is it says, when you go to record, this is the track we're going to record. So say, for instance, we have our MIDI track here, and let's go ahead and just grab a random. So we have an operator here. Now once it's armed, we're saying, when you go to record, this is the track we're going to record. Now, I don't know if you noticed or not, but I actually played that on my actual computer keyboard. And in order to use your keyboard as a keyboard, you're going to hit M, which allows you to use your normal computer keyboard as a MIDI keyboard. So up top, moving over to the left, we have input. Now this is where your signal is coming from. On MIDI, we have all in, so it's pulling a signal from everywhere. Computer keyboard. Up here, we have external in, which could be set to no input because we already have an audio clip on here. So your input is just basically what your source of input is. Moving down, where do we want this track to go? 9 out of 10 times, I would say you want it to go to your master. Some people run a pre-master, or you can run it to the sends only. So you can go straight out, skip the master. You can add something custom, or you can have it go to the master, which you're going to do 99% of the time. Moving down, we have input and how it's going to read it. So auto means automatically reads it. Off means there's not going to be any. So when it's set to in, you'll always hear the audio coming in from your source. When it's set to auto, you'll only hear the playthrough when the track is armed for recording. So we have a pretty good understanding of all this stuff over here. One thing to note is that by default, these little yellow buttons here on the bottom right are the different menus and selections for up here. So we can choose to close out any of these. So we have your main, we have our returns, and then we have our ins and outs. One thing that's not selected by default is the track delay. What it does is it shifts the whole track up or down. So if you want like a percussive instrument to be a little lazy or something like that, you can use the track delay. It's one of my favorite features of Ableton. So just so you know, that's not selected by default. So we've gone over this pretty good, in pretty good measure. Now we're gonna kind of talk about our different features up here at the top. So record. That's self-explanatory. That means we're recording the armed track we selected, or armed tracks. You can arm more than one at a time. Stop, and play is play. So now up here, moving over to the right from our transposition controls, we have this plus symbol. What this does is it allows you to record MIDI over MIDI without deleting the previous MIDI. So to kind of show you what I'm talking about, we're going to select this. So notice if we didn't have this on, it overwrites the MIDI. So that plus symbol allows us to add MIDI without deleting the existing MIDI. Moving over to the right, this kind of like linking chain icon is do the same thing, but it's for automation. So we can record automation over the existing MIDI without deleting it. So when we select this, and we're gonna come over here and so now when we play it back, notice down here, our parameter so now notice down here our parameter is automated. We can right click, show automation, and we can come in here and pencil it in and change it if we want, but that's basically the use of that feature. Now sometimes your automation gets disabled. This happens because you changed a setting or you adjusted something else. If you wanted to go back and re-enable this automation, that's what this little arrow here is for. This little box up here that almost looks like a picture square, like maybe the frame of a camera or something. This is a super cool feature that Ableton's implemented, which actually allows you to capture MIDI that you didn't record. So let's say you just put down like some bars, something super sick, you were stoked on it, but you didn't hit record. This will actually bring it back, which is super cool. So to kind of show you how this works. So I messed up, I didn't record it, or I was just playing around and I liked it. If we hit this, it'll bring it right up. Super tight. This has really saved me a couple times, so it's a cool little trick to know. And this last one here at the end toggles between playback and overdub. So once you click this, it's going to go into a session view type clip. So I don't really use that one too much. Up here, we have the controls for the different bars. The quickest way to adjust and kind of go through these are, pay attention, these are super important. So if we highlight this, Command L is going to be loop. So now it's just going to play the loop. Command L again is unloop. Now Command 1 and 2 is going to make your grid bigger or smaller. So Command 1 makes it smaller, so you have more increments between each different bar. 2 is going to make it bigger. So if you want easier selection for bigger clips, Command 2 a couple times and you'll get here. Command 3 actually puts it in triplet grid. So if we press Command 3 here now, we have triplets. Command 4 gives you the dotted grid, which shows you where the grid is, but it won't lock to it. And then one of my favorites is if you hold down Command and you scroll down on your pad or on your keyboard, it'll allow you to zoom out with down or zoom in with up. So if we're looking for this kick here, we can just kind of hold Command, zoom in, and then we can do the same thing with Option. If you scroll up or down, it'll make the clip more narrow or shorter. Also a really cool trick. And then if we just want to get to one audio clip super quick, we're going to go ahead and click it and then click Z. And that's going to make that clip the size of our arrangement view. So now that we have a pretty good understanding of arrangement view and kind of how it works and everything, we're going to talk about some of our features over here on the left. Everything over here is having to do with your samples, your VSTs, everything associated with your Ableton, your plugins, your sample library, all that is going to live over here on the left. Now the top 7 are collections, and these are ones that you actually get to set yourself. So everybody's got a different workflow. For me, what I really like to do is I have my samples, my favorite samples that, I'll be going through my library and I'll find one that I love and I'll toss it up here to favorites so I can find them quick. Then I have Create, which to me is my favorite sound generating VSTs or racks or whatever they are. My effects, which are all my different favorite effects for after I've generated a sound. Then I have ones that I haven't maybe reviewed yet, a new plugin I bought that I want to kind of get in depth with. Favorite drums. Purple, I think, is kind of just no man's land right now. And then I have my utilities. So any way you want to do these, I recommend something like this. Works really good, but these are basically to be set however you see fit. And the cool part about these is when you're over here, these are in alphanumeric order. So if I want to change this, red is 1, orange is 2, yellow is 3. So you can actually change and add these with just pressing the keys. So say if I have a sound that maybe is also a utility, I can press 7 and now it's living in both. So have fun with these. These are kind of up to you. So that's kind of just how I did mine. So moving down here to categories, all these in categories are going to be Ableton Live specific folders. So these are not going to be your personal samples. These are not going to be your personal VSTs. These are things directly from Ableton. So if you have a Live Suite, it's going to be all the plugins for Live Suite and everything like that. So under sounds, what these basically are, sounds generated by a synthesizer within Ableton. So these are basically like presets if you're more familiar with like Serum or something like that. So if we click on this, it's a sound, but it's being created by an Ableton device. So drums, again, these are all Ableton specific, just Ableton drum racks. Instruments, now these are the noise generators. So like we were just talking about, this was made with an Ableton instrument. If we click on operator, now we have operator with all these different presets. Now coming to audio effects, these are going to be all your audio effects relating to Ableton in particular. MIDI effects, arpeggiators, chord generators, all that stuff lives in here. Max for Live, this is going to be the folder where all your Max for Live devices are stored at. So this is going to be empty by default. But as you go on, they have tons of free Max for Live devices out there. They have some amazing ones. Shortcut Buddy, I just covered this one. I'll link it. It's a super good shortcut plugin. All these, the ones you pick up over time, are going to live in here. But this is only Max for Live devices, not external. Plugins, this is going to be your personal plugin folder. Now, if you want to learn how to set your plugin folder or set it up, I'll link that video in this description as well. But it already knows where my VST folder is. And now I have here all of my many unused expensive plugins that I've collected over years. So this is your personal plugin library. So moving down to clips, it allows you to store MIDI with the corresponding device in. So basically it's like your instruments, your settings, and your MIDI clip. So it's like the whole shebang of your clip. It's called a .alc file. So if we open this up or drag it in, you'll see we have our MIDI, we have our settings, we have our instrument. It's all right here. Now samples, once again, we're kind of at the Ableton tab here. So these are going to be all the samples within Ableton. So these are all your stock samples that came with Ableton. Going down to grooves, this is a really cool thing that Ableton's pretty like specific for that I don't think any other DAWs have. This allows you to apply different grooves and different movements to your MIDI clips or your audio clips. So we're going to go ahead and toss a hi-hat in here. So we have our hi-hat. Now groove is a whole nother topic. I'm going to make a video about it. It's super important. It's one of my favorite things to cover, but groove basically adds a shuffle to and adds livelihood and movement and all that stuff into your loop. So if we come over here, what we're going to do is we're going to click our grooves. And once we select a groove, some of my favorite are like the MPC swings. Once we click it, it goes into the groove pool. So now that we've selected it, it's living inside of our groove pool, which we can use to apply to our clips. So now that we click on here and we go down to our groove bank, we see it here. It has to be in the pool in order for it to go here. So now that we've selected it, we can hear the difference of this to this. This one's pretty dramatic, but it just goes to show that it has all that movement and that swing and that random and velocity and all that stuff that you're going to want to put in anyway. So definitely take advantage of these. This over here will allow you to add how much time and how much random and how much of the groove you want implemented into your clip. So super cool feature, definitely check it out. Coming down here to templates, this can be your own templates that you save. For example, sometimes I record audio or dialogue. So I have a template built for that where I already have tracks open, I already have plugins open, I have my sends a certain way. So basically you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you open up Ableton. I highly recommend using these as well. And a side note, you actually can save templates outside of this now. You can save them. So when you open up your project, it opens up automatically. So moving down to packs, again, this is an Ableton thing. This has to do with your Ableton packs. They're either free or purchased on the Ableton website. So I have like a granulator pack, and this is like a Ableton instrument, or pitch drop, or like Slink devices. These are all different filters that come out of this pack that I downloaded off the Ableton website. Now you'll notice we have places up here. We can actually add any folders we want to this. So places, I added my samples, which is over here on my desktop. Samples right here. I have desktop in case I want to search like a track that's off my desktop. These you can kind of set how you see fit. User library will always live here. This is where I recommend tossing your clips that you've made that you want to save yourself. So like I have, you know, all my stuff that I personally made or added to this user library. Current project is going to be all the files in the current project you have open. So that goes into kind of file structure and stuff like that, but you can see them all here. Samples, like I was just saying, this is actually a outside of Ableton folder that I added. It's the one that I keep all my samples in. So wherever you keep all your samples, you can add folder and you can select that folder and add it. Splice, if you have Splice, it'll automatically create a folder here, and this is where all your Splice samples are going to live. So that's everything over here. And note that these two menus over here, we have lower menu and the browser menu. Option Command L will minimize the lower menu, and Option Command B will minimize the browser menu. So these are two quick keys that'll save you a lot of time, and you can kind of drag them to how much space you want on each. One part we kind of skipped out on up here is the tempo and time signature and metronome and all that stuff up here. So tap is actually going to allow you to tap in the tempo you want. So say you're like, maybe you're using a reference track and you want to tap into tempo. You can do that up here, and you'll notice if I tap it, it'll actually match the tempo to how I'm tapping on my mouse, which is super cool. Here you can set the tempo automatically. You can just enter a numeric value. Over here we have our time signature. I never really venture outside of 4/4, but if you wanted to, you could just quickly adjust it here, 3/4, 4/4, anything like that. 4/8. So up here, these two menus, I've never really used these, but what they actually do is they temporarily decrease or speed up the tempo of your track to match external music. What does that mean? It sounds really confusing. Basically, if you have a reference song that you want to drag in, if you did that and the tempos weren't matching, it would kind of become a disaster in trying to get them to match. So you can temporarily match it with this and then kind of dial it in from there. So this little percentage up here reflects on the groove pool, and this determines how much of the different characteristics of the groove pool you want to implement on your own track. So that's pretty cool to have that up here. And then, of course, we have our metronome. So to turn it on, we just click. It's the two circles up here. Now, this is for count-in. You can select what kind of count-in you want. 1 bar, 2 bar, 4 bars. The sound, click, wood. Rhythm is how many beeps per bar and everything like that. So that's all in here. The count-in will only apply when you're recording. So generally, I just keep it on 1 bar count-in, classic, auto. And here we'll dictate. Now up here is the global bar synchronization. So what that means is it's basically giving the unit of measurement to adjust the track by, so you don't have any offset stuff or anything like that. This little arrow up here makes it so the cursor follows the audio clip. So if it's on, it'll kind of just, the view will follow where you're at. If it's off, it won't. And this is your counting up here of which bar and which section you're in and everything. And then down here we have your time. So we can see we're at about 5 seconds down here. So that's a pretty comprehensive guide of pretty much every single button on the session view. One thing I'm going to touch on briefly is our sample editor down here. So we have our groove pool, which we talked about. We have our loop, which we'll just loop it. And then we have our warp modes. Now, like, you can literally research warp modes for days. They're all so different. You can do so much things with all of them. But you usually want to leave yours on complex. Complex is the most versatile warp mode. It's basically how it stretches out the clip and how it's treated when it's warped. And then you have ones like Complex Pro, which are better for vocals, beats, which are obviously better for beats, tones. So all these are used a little bit differently, and they all are affecting the pitch, and then they're affecting how they sound when they're sped up or slowed down. So I'm also going to do a video on that in the future. I'm going to be releasing a ton of videos, so if you guys want to subscribe, it really helps me out. I appreciate it. Coming over here to gain, this is how you can adjust the gain of the actual audio clips. This is not like the fader where you're adjusting the gain of the track. You're actually adjusting the gain of the actual clip here. And then pitch, like I was saying, warp mode is going to affect how this pitch is treated. You can affect it here, or you can use sense right here. So sense, there's 100 in every semitone. So if you don't want to quite go a semitone, you can play with the sense here, and you can go in increments of 100. Then we have this, which will reverse the clip. Then edit. I actually did a video on this. You can actually link an external audio editor to this. And then when you click it, like mine's set to Isotope RX9, and I can edit it directly in there, and it'll update it live in here, which is super cool. So that is a pretty damn comprehensive guide of Ableton Live in arrangement mode. If you guys have any questions or anything, just let me know. I'll respond in the chat. And once again, if you guys are looking to accelerate your path to becoming a better producer, I mentor one-on-one. It's the best thing that's ever worked for me, and I've been to formal schools, spent money on education, YouTube, and all that. So really works good. The link's in the description for that. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Mark.